So welcome everybody for another sharing session today. Today's topic is on heat stressors. From my perspective, there's quite a lot going on in heat stresses. It's almost in a very similar bucket as lone worker, where not a lot of organizations understand that they have these type of individuals in their roles that are exposed to heat stress or lone working, etc. So just before we're carrying on, I would just like to be a bit of a housekeeping rules. Please mute your microphone if you're not already on mute. If you would like to unmute and be part of the discussion or answer a question, please do so. It's up to Derek, which is our main speaker for today. If you would like to have live action questions or use the questions and answer functionality. So please make use of that if you don't want to be live. But I hope you enjoyed for today. And just before I hand over to Derek, for those who don't know, from a ShopCare perspective, we're busy with quite a number of things currently. We're hard at work with violent and aggressive behavior. We've got a critical risk report coming out within the next 1 or 2 weeks. It's just basically in the final stages of publishing. We have a driver safety guide out and in collaboration with the AA. So please go watch out on our website and download a copy, or even on AA's website and download a copy. We're very proud of that one, and a lot of work is going into that. And we're hoping to speed up the process from keeping drivers safe. We're also busy with site markings, so please watch out for that. My colleague Catherine is quite heavily invested when it comes to site markings on manufacturing sites, etc. We still offer musculoskeletal training for anybody in the retail sector. So please, yet again, just join our website if you're a retailer, and you'll be able to access that manual handling training pretty easily. Then we do have other couple of resources, guys. We have a hierarchies of controls that you can go look and watch at. This will help you out, as well as bow ties for the same. And then that's basically it in a nutshell. And then lastly, before I hand over to Derek, guys, these fine pictures that you see in front of you is up and coming webinar / sharing session sets are up and coming. So we have one on lone workers with Petra. We have Dr. Hilary Bennett. That's going to do a piece around mental well-being by design. And a very interesting one also coming up is Jason Johnstone. And I would say he's most probably one of the leading individuals when it comes to vibration. And he will be talking about, especially from hand-arm vibration, talking from experience as well. Then 2 other people that's worth mentioning as well is John Peachy. He calls himself the chief people mechanic, which I love that title. And he'll be looking after or talking towards the topic of, health and safety and well-being leadership, mostly aimed at that middle to executive leadership. So please dial in for that one. And a very pertinent topic in the times we live in today is, Sarah McGuinness. She is also a founder and CEO of Revolutionaries of Wellbeing. And she'll be talking about burnout. Yet again, talking from experience, especially with a connection and a link to Omicron / COVID-19, because we're all pretty much fatigued, and a lot of the workers will feel the same brunt of that. So she'll be doing quite a big topic on burnout, and please engage with us on that. Just contact us afterwards and we can set you up with an invitation. Without further ado, I won't bore you too much. I would like to introduce Derek Miller. He is a consultant when it comes to occupational hygienist, and he's got a number of years and international experience as well. Derek, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Wes. Right, today we're going to talk about heat stress. Why? Well, it's something that actually affects us a lot more than we think, and we often ignore it at our own peril. Being a Scotsman, I'm particularly susceptible to anything over 10 degrees centigrade. But I have actually seen people go down with heat stroke and other heat illnesses in places like the desert. But I've also seen them go down in the north of Scotland. So it's not a thing we need to associate with the country we are in. And in New Zealand, it is of importance. So today we're going to look at some of the effects of heat stresses, who can be affected, heat policy, monitoring and controls. And if you keep any questions till the end, we'll have our session at the end for any, we can do questions and answers. So why is it important? We're coming towards the end of summer. Well, as we see, the temperatures are staying, they're staying longer, and each summer seems to be getting warmer, and the periods of heat waves longer, which means we're going to see more effects of heat stressors on our bodies. And if you look on the bottom right of the screen, you'll see New Zealand tucked away off to the side. I couldn't get one with us in the middle for the weather. And it actually shows that we are much warmer than average this year. And that was updated in January. And this is becoming a global trend. So it's something we need to start thinking about and planning long-term as well as short-term. So, heat stress, what is it? Well, it occurs when our body means of controlling its internal temperature starts to fail. Air temperature, work rate, humidity, and even clothing are all factors which can cause heat stress. We can get heat bouncing off from the tarmac, the concrete, etc. We've got conduction from the touching things that pass heat onto the body. We've got reflections coming off from buildings, etc. And you get that quite a lot in town. So sometimes when you see the Met Office saying, let's say Auckland, for example, is going to be 24 degrees centigrade, if you're in the CBD, you're probably actually about 26, because it'd be about roughly 2 to 3 degrees warmer than the actual air temperature when you're in amongst the buildings and all that reflected heat is coming down onto you. So ideally, you keep the body between 36.8 and 37.2 degrees centigrade. And the body regulates that naturally through sweating and other mechanisms. However, when we've got a high ambient temperature, high humidity, lack of airflows, and also the radiation coming off from the buildings and reflective heat coming off, that's when it can push our body up above 37.2 and we're into the danger zones. It's not always obvious to someone going through a workplace or even out and about doing deliveries, other things, that there is a risk of heat stress. We accept the heat. So one of the ways we deal with it is our body increases the blood flow to our skin surface and we sweat. And as the sweat evaporates off, we actually cool down. So sweating is actually good for you. So temperature is taken away as the sweat evaporates. We can also lose it through things like radiation and convection from the body. And when we've got heat stress, it actually affects our performance at work. There have been a number of studies done since, believe it or not, 1916, 1917, around this. And some of them have a lot of looked at athletes. And as you can see on the screen here on the left-hand side, temperature, ambient temperatures, 25 to 40. At 25 degrees, our performance in an athlete will drop by 3%. By the time we're up into the 30s, we drop 10 to 18%. And if you hit 40 degrees, you're down by a 28% performance. We can apply that to the workplace as well. What we also know is that we get less accidents in the workplace when we're between about 18 and 20 degrees Celsius. And as temperatures keep increasing, the number of accidents do increase. And if we look at drivers in particular, and people often forget about them in relation to heat, but they're out there in the cabs driving all day and not always with air conditioning in the vehicles or working air conditioning. So there's a study done which looked at drivers between 21 degrees centigrade and 27. The proportion of signals that were missed by the drivers increased by 50%. And the reaction time also increased by about 22%, which means that they're about a fifth slower than they would be normally. If you think around accidents, other bits and pieces, spotting exits, etc., we've got an increased risk to our driving force and to the pedestrians and others around. So heat is not just the effects on the body, it affects our work when we're exposed to heat stresses. So there are a number of effects on us. We've got straightforward ones, as you can see here, from fatigue. People don't realise when you're exposed to a lot of heat and you're suffering from the heat stresses, it actually increases the risk of fatigue. We've got prickly heat, heat cramps, fainting, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke, which is often deadly. So again, the way we control this is through sweating, etc. And sometimes what we find is we put a lot of clothes on people, particularly protective equipment, and we make them wear longs and other bits and pieces for their safety, but we can now impede people sweating, which now increases our risk of heat stress. So we've got to balance these things out. So it's not just, does that look like a nice uniform, but does that uniform help keep a person cool? The harder we work, the more liable we are to go into these things. And from my experience, I have seen fatigue, seen prickly heat quite a lot, particularly with the people blocking the skin spores by using too much soap, etc. Heat cramps, most of you will have suffered from at some point. How often during the summer are you in bed, something like that, and you get a sudden leg cramp and you've got to massage it out? That is often a sign that you're dehydrated or you're lacking the essential vitamins that you need through good diet, etc. And it's an early sign of heat stresses. You've all seen pictures of soldiers standing on parade grounds suddenly just passing out. That's fainting, and normally it's during the summer months. And it's a lack of movement amongst them. And one of the things that's happening is when you're getting the heat stress going on, the body temperature, internal body temperature is rising. Your heart rate is now starting to increase because it's got to pump the blood through to the outer skin to give it a chance to cool down. That now puts additional strain onto the body. And unfortunately, what happens is often we end up gaining more heat than we're losing, and that pushes us up the ranks of these heat issues. What are the most simple things? Well, look at your staff, look at yourself, think about things. Is your ability during the summer months and the heat, and do you find it difficult to concentrate on things? That's a sign that you may be having issues. The muscle cramps I've mentioned, the prickly heat, which is heat rashes, not uncommon. Thirst. A lot of people say, I only drink when I get thirsty. However, severe thirst, gagging for a drink, is a late symptom of heat stress. And heat exhaustion, heat stroke. Those are the two you never want to see. I've seen both, unfortunately. With heat exhaustion, fatigue, dizziness, nausea, headache, and your skin is wet. Heat stroke, though, is very hot, dry skin. The person will become confused, convulse, and can lose consciousness, and in severe disorders can result in death. And in my career, I'm aware of 3 deaths. And one of them happened 2 minutes after his boss had spoken to him. And that was how fast heat stroke can hit. So, as I said, early signs and symptoms. This is when you need to stop things, or you need to say, look, I need to get a break. I need to go into the shade. I need to cool off. I need a rest. And it can be simple as headaches, feeling dehydrated, maybe a rash. you're really sweating heavily, or you're getting muscle cramps. At that point, you need a bit of time to yourself. And normally I find 15 to 20 minutes in an air-conditioned area or cool place with some lukewarm water, and you bounce back. These are more serious. Now, this I've taken direct, as you can see, from the Civil Defence and Emergency Management. It's been adapted, and this is freely available. And I'll come back onto references and resources that are available to you all for nothing. And as you can see, there's plenty of information out there. There's also first aid. So when you come to training your workforce, if you've got a workforce or even a small team, get them to understand the first aid. Because there's a lot of things that are quite simple. And that is, we move people to a cool environment, let them rest, get them water on board. If you think they need an electrolyte solution, don't always, then do it. And just let them recover and then come back to work. On the more serious ones, the heat exhaustion, heat stroke, it's important to understand the signs and symptoms, because things are really bad at this point, and at those, you dial treble 1 and call for help. In the meantime, you can help them take on board some fluids, rest them in a cool environment, etc., while you're waiting for additional aid. So who can be infected? Well, anybody can. We see not just any member of the public can be affected, and the countries that have been suffering heat issues this past year, a lot of non-workers have died from heat-related illnesses. Outdoor workers are particularly affected. And here I've got a couple of examples: the agricultural side, the fisheries, going out on the boats, etc. And think of your fruit pickers going out and they picking the fruit, these type of things. Not just the farmers, it's the people that help and man these jobs. Delivery drivers. They're in the vehicles all day, and often the vehicles aren't always well maintained. And you'll see them driving with the windows wound down, which normally means they haven't got air conditioning, etc. It's not doing them any good. They are actually at more risk than people realise, particularly if they're sitting in traffic in Wellington or Auckland for long periods of time. Bakeries, commercial kitchens, lots of ovens. But it's not just the bakers and the chefs, cooks, etc. that is at risk. What about the people in the back area? I've done about 3 investigations into people fainting doing the washing up. So you've got the hot water, you've got the heat from the kitchens coming through. It's not well ventilated a lot of the time, and you've got all the moisture going in the air from the water. And people do faint, and as a result of the heat stress. So think about all these other people around you. Naturally enough, people walking on the roads and also in the construction industries. And I'm sure there's many more examples you can think of. And for those of you who work on a 9-to-5 type thing within your working environment, who comes in and does the cleaning afterwards when you've shut everything down? Are you shutting the ventilation down when the cleaners are coming in and things like this? Are you starting to put them under heat stress? And again, we've seen these people being forgotten about, the maintenance workers and others, and often they get put through an awful lot more because people haven't considered the working environment for them. They've only considered those during normal working hours. So again, when you look at this, look a bit wider than just a few people. So some of these industries, heat is the norm, like in the bakeries and commercial kitchens and laundries. These machines generate a lot of heat, putting it into the air. However, others are less often dependent on the type of work being done and changes in the working environment. So we can have seasonal ones, where they're working outdoors during the winter, not a problem, work outdoors during the summer. or they're in the metal shed at the side of the building working. So we'll cut on to hydration. Right, before I come on to hydration, one of the things with heat stressors is over time, people can acclimatise. When they acclimatise, they can adapt to the hot conditions and they sweat more, they change their behaviour to try and cool down. They wear looser clothing, lighter clothing, etc. They take cool drinks, they fan themselves, sit in the shade, maybe slow down the work pace. That's great when we can acclimatise and we can get used to it. Often here in New Zealand and many other countries like ourselves, we don't have time. The heat hits us hard and fast. So we have a higher risk of a heat stressors occurring. But when we need to do that, we need to look into things. So for hydration, as it states up there, it can be that dehydration, actually don't have enough water on board. We talked about sweating. We have to sweat. It's the way we cool. Dogs pant. You see them with their mouths open, breathing in. That's how they cool down because they do not sweat. We sweat. But as we're pumping out fluid, we need to take on fluids to replace that bits and pieces. Not saying don't have alcohol or caffeine, but moderate it. I'm a big coffee drinker, but I do moderate during the heat months. One of the problems we do have is a lot of people don't realise they're actually dehydrated most of the time. And studies done in Australia and here in New Zealand, jobs I've been involved in, we have done hydration studies, and we've actually found a large percentage of the work population coming to work are dehydrated before they even start. So we need to get the message out. It's not just about being hydrated at work, it's about being hydrated all the time. This is a very old thing that I learned some 30 plus many years ago. And it's a pinch test, and I still do this on a regular basis during the hot months. And basically, take your hand and a pinch, let it go, and it should spring back. As we get older, it takes a bit longer, but that's just to do with the body. Get to know yourself. As it says, pull up about a centimetre, let it go, and it should bounce back naturally. And mine does, means I'm hydrated. If it takes longer than normal, then it means you're dehydrated. You probably are a bit dehydrated if it takes a few seconds longer to settle back down. So you might be dehydrated. That's a clue. Take on a bit more water. It's a very simple test. I've done it in the car. I've done it when I've been on jobs, particularly when I'm wearing respirators and protective equipment. I've done a quick check. And if necessary, I've gone off and got myself some fluids and rehydrated. Also with hydration, there's some, if you go online, you actually find some lovely posters. One of my favourite is of beer, and it's different colours of beer. It starts with water and runs up to Guinness. And it says, you've got too much water on board. And if it gets to the Guinness, it says, please see a doctor, you're very ill. And it's to do with the colour of the urine. There's other versions with tea and bits and pieces. This was done, as you can see here, by Dr. Over at the time, don't know if he's still there or not, at Wollongong University. He did a major study into dehydration and heat, etc. And I'll come back to him in a minute because there's a really good app associated with him you can use. And this is what he came out with, and the colours actually match the different colours of urine. You'll see this on back of doors and toilets in some workplaces. You'll see it around and about. There's various ones out. What I will say, if you use any of the posters, whether it be from WorkSafe, Minister of Health, etc., is always go back to the original source for the poster and get it. Because when they've been photocopied and maybe scanned into the machines, etc., the colour changes. You want the original colours because they will actually match the colours that we've done. And when you go to the toilet, you can do a quick check. You think, oh, I'm getting a bit dark. I need more water on board. And so we've used that successfully in a number of jobs. And normally we put them above the urinals for the gents and in the cubicles for the ladies. Right. Heat policy. Should you have one? I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no. This is something you need to think about. Is it an actual problem for you? If so, maybe you should have one. If you are going to create one, please remember and include your workplace health and safety rep. Keep it practical. And the good news is, if you actually put in heat policies into your search engines, it will turn up lots of examples from universities, boards, education, workplaces from around the globe. And you can actually borrow them and then adjust it to your own. A lot of the really good ones are maybe 1-2 pages long. They're not massive. You don't need to write a novel. But if you think heat is a problem and it's going to be a long-going one, then it's worth having something put in print so you can refer back to it when you require and adjust it. Right. Part of monitoring is carrying out risk assessments. And there's 3 types that we often do. It's a very, very simple risk assessment, quick and dirty, which I'm always in favour of at the start. Then we can do area risk assessments and we can do personal risk assessments. An area risk assessment is one where we put monitors in and you can actually measure the area. And most of the machines will measure an area between anywhere from 50 to a couple of 100 meters around it. So you sometimes have to have multiple machines. It gives you a good idea what's going on in the area. Personal is exactly what it says. It's often related to physical heat strain. And if you want personal risk assessments done, you need to seek expert help. It is complex and it takes time. It involves quite a bit of information. And at that point, I'll say seek help. And I'll give you where you can find help in a minute. So when you look at your risk assessment, what do you want to think about? Well, how hard is a person working? What are they doing? They're sitting here and they're just doing that with a hand. That's not particularly, but they're sitting swinging hammers and other bits and pieces. Well, that's harder, picking up big boxes, moving them. So the harder you work, the more your body heat your body will generate. Where are they working? What's the air temperature? What's the humidity? Is there actually any air movement in the area? And are they near heat sources, etc.? Are they having to climb ladders and things? What protective equipment are they wearing? So does it allow them to sweat? Can it help regulate? And the last bit you've got to think about is what is the age, build, medical factors of your workforce? Because there's a number of things that can affect an individual's tolerance. And there's even medications, etc. That doctors should warn their patients when they give them out that it can increase the risk to heat stress, etc. Often it's on the little leaflets that come with these things. It's worth knowing about. And one of those would be like some of the migraine sufferers, some of their medicines make them more susceptible to the sun and sunburn. Just things like that you need to be aware of. As I say, whenever you come onto these areas, always involve your health and safety reps in the discussions and what you're going to do. So this is a nice simple one, and it's an app. And you see the gentleman there also did the urine charts. It's very simple to use. It's free. And the only thing you need on it to put into the app is the temperature and the humidity. And as you can see, once you've downloaded the app onto your machine, and it works on both Android and Apple, no problems. You start off with, are you working outdoors? Are you working indoors, etc. So it starts off very simple, and you just press the button for what you want. It's the wind, no wind, strong wind, moderate, etc. Again, click. And as you work your way through, you come to climatic conditions. What's the air temperature? What's the relative humidity? You do not need to go and buy a device to do this. One, most of our phones have on it a little weather thing that tells us the weather where we are. So you can get the information from that, or you can get the information from the Met Service. Put it in, hit calculate, it will then give you a result. It asks you a number of questions around your work. Are they working light, hard? Are they wearing respirators? Are they wearing protective equipment? And you've got choices at each one. At the end of it, when you've done it, it will give you a result and some advice. And then you can follow it. And what I'd say, if you do use this thermal risk app, and it is good, I've recommended it to many clients as a quick, easy way to do things. Note things down that you've done it. And what I normally say is, look, do it about an hour after you start work. It takes a couple of minutes. Maybe do it again at lunchtime and maybe mid-afternoon. So, because it will change the risk as the day goes on. But that is a very nice, simple tool that anybody can use, and it is designed for a non-technical. If you want to go down the technical side and you want to start doing area monitoring of things and actually have more formal, at that point I would say start thinking about either having training for your health and safety team or your occupational health team, or call in specialists. There's a number of different systems out there. The most common ones that we come across is the wet bulb globe temperature, WBGT index, and it's an indice, so it's not a straight number, it's a formula. The thermal work limit, TWL, and humidex. A WBGT is an old one that's over 60 years old now, still used, it has been modernized, and it is referred to in ISO standards. You need specialist equipment to do it, but you can pick that up at reasonable cost, and I'll go into that in a minute. The WBGT is based on a regime. So when you calculate out things with the work rate, personal protective equipment, other bits and pieces, it will then say, well, you can work 45 minutes, then you need 15 minutes rest and shade. So it's quite regimented in that sense. And if you've got a job where that you do have that, where people have a set times and you can do it, good system. If you've got one where people can self-regulate, then the thermal work limit might be for you. Again, speak to specialists and they can guide you and advise you. The thermal work limit was developed in Australia, particularly for the mining industry. Now we find it being used all over the globe, and it's actually quite very popular in the construction industry and oil and gas industries, because this is where people can come and go from the workplace, from the workface when they need to. And that one there, again, is an indice. Machines will churn out the numbers, and the lower the number, the higher the risk. It's the opposite of WBGT, where the higher the number, the higher the risk. So this one's lower, and then it goes mandated once it goes on beyond a certain point. But that's quite a good one, and some of the machines actually come with little alarms you can set on it, put the machine up in the area, and they'll flash red and send off an alarm to say you're entering into the hazard zones. Humidex is a very, very simple system. It comes from Canada, and it just works off the temperature and the humidity, similar to what we're talking about on a simple risk assessment. As a straightforward graph, you plot the two on it, where they cross gives you your risk. I say there are others out there on the marketplace, but these are the three main ones that we come across. So when we're doing area risk assessments, as I said, lots of different instruments. This is just some of the instruments out there. There are masses of them. And what we need them to do is you've got to be able to monitor the air temperature, funny old thing, radiant temperature, humidity, airspeed, and also machines could be able to put in the insulation value of the clothing. All this builds up into what your heat stress factor is, and then you can apply your actions. They all have pros and cons, every single thing. The big red one from Quest, big beast, needs software to download it, etc. Not a bad machine. Used in a lot of places. You can get them actually where they're all dry, because that one actually has this water which you have to top up. The one on the bottom I've never used, but I have seen it out and about. And the two orange ones, the little drop one in the middle with the big wood kestrel on it and really nothing else, that's a personal monitor. And I actually have one of those on my pack. This is going out on the job tonight because we're going into a heat situation, and it records my personal exposure. And we've used that on jobs where, because it's a cheaper one, and we've actually used it on places where we want to monitor, and the big machines would be too cumbersome, like in, say, the vehicle of a cab, of a lorry or something like that. We can drop one of those into it quite easily, and it will give us feedback. The good news about a lot of the modern machines is you can actually download them onto your phone immediately by Bluetooth and then send it back, and it's on your desk when you get back to your office to analyze in more detail. Or you can send it on to a specialist and say, look, and give an example, we did that in some work going on in the South Island a couple of years ago. And so the health and safety team had monitors out. They downloaded them and then emailed through to myself the spreadsheets. I could immediately look at them and go back with immediate advice. So we had a quick way of responding. And the insulation value of clothing, highly important, particularly in this day and age. Sometimes you see people wearing an awful lot of protective clothing, and I scratch my head thinking, why on earth is that person wearing a hard hat, for example? There's nothing going to fall down onto their head. So why have they got one on? What's policy? Well, in that case, it's a silly policy. If it's not protecting you against a natural hazard, why wear it? And so it can actually, you can actually get people out of some clothing or adjust the clothing. You choose something a bit more wearable and comfortable. Now, as I mentioned, physical heat strain, this is personal risk. We've done a few jobs around the country on this. Often they wear what I always call the sports bra, normally men, and he's got a device. And you'll actually see those devices being worn people like the All Blacks, etc., out in the sports fields. And it's got monitors inside it, which monitors all the vital signs and other areas. This is highly technical, and it's not something to do yourself. You do need specialist help with this type of thing. As I said, I'll direct you that way. Because one of the other reasons for it is you actually have to agreement with the wearers, it collects personal health data, etc. So normally it's a team approach to using these. But it really is good because it means for large companies where they're doing the same thing day in, day out with a lot of heat sources, we can actually set up personal programs for dealing with the heat for individuals. Right, controls. The reason we have controls is to protect health, improve safety, and increase productivity. Basically, we've got less errors occurring. We get an increase in productivity then, and workers feel more comfortable, and often they become more productive as a result, rather than sitting there going, oh, I'm hot, I'm uncomfortable, etc. So we need to be able to control things. We've got to control the temperature. Can we engineer it? In some cases, yes. Things like fans, air conditioning, things like that. The problem with fans is if you hit top of my skull, I think it's about 32 degrees centigrade or above, you put a fan in, you actually increase heat stress. Fans work at the lower end of the temperatures. Once it goes above, fans actually build convection and actually draws more heat. It allows the heat to build up within the body. So you've got to be careful around fans when you're using them. An old trick we used to do was to put buckets of iced water in front of the fans, and that actually resolved the issue, cooled it down. And for those of you who see the TV adverts, etc., it's quite amused us watching it a couple of nights ago. An advert came on, and there's a little air conditioner for your bedroom for night, and you put water in it, and it draws the air blows the air over the water to cool you down. And I thought we were doing that in the old days with a bucket of iced water in front of a fan. But now you've got to pay a lot of money for it. Mechanical aids, use them if they're available. Reduce the workload on the person. How long do they need to be out there? So if it's above a certain temperature, ban it. Say, okay, you're not going outside to work, or you're not going into that area to work. It's too hot. And then, or change your work time to a cooler time of the day. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they're saying Spain's now looking at taking away the siestas from the afternoon because of the commute distance. And so Spain, because of the heat problems they have, they're now thinking about changing the working hours to let people finish earlier. And places like Cyprus, often you start at 5 o'clock in the morning, you finish at 1 o'clock in the day, and that's it. So lots of places have done it. So say, oh, we can't do it, it's never really an excuse. It can be done. Make sure there's regular rest breaks, rest facilities. Put up a bit of shade, a little air conditioning rig or something that'll keep people cool, and let them just have a break out of the heat. And put in regular rest breaks. Make sure water is available. It doesn't have to have electrolytes. It doesn't have to be any of these V's and all these other things. They're not much good, to be honest. But you do need some water around. Help prevent dehydration. And give you an idea, some jobs, people can need to drink between 200 ml of water every 15 minutes in some jobs. And that's just to maintain their level. Personal equipment. There's a lot on the market nowadays that has wearable technology involved with it. It's out there and it's a reasonable price. Train your workers. Not only about what's associated with their particular job, but also what to look out for signs and symptoms, because often the person going down with heat might not realize it themselves, but somebody can spot it in them. So you need that buddy care where possible. If it is possible, let people acclimatize and build themselves up. And identify anybody that's going to be more susceptible. So here's just a few of simple controls for outdoors. When you're doing it, as you can see, what we've basically been talking about, wear clothes that's actually a bit loose. You don't want tight-fitting clothes. Provide toilets. Often when I speak to people who have had heat problems or why they're not drinking enough, etc., and they go, the toilet's too far away. Right. So provide toilets and provide convenient locations for them. Again, even indoors, we have problems, particularly with the thermal environment, etc. And a lot of buildings in New Zealand can be metal sheds. We'll get people working in them. So we can actually have quite a lot of issues in those, particularly radiating heat. It's basically very similar. The only difference is when we're indoors, we can provide ventilation. It's easy to provide cooling fans. We can put in reflective shields where possible. So there's things we can do. And also, your protective clothing. In a lot of jobs that we go to as hygienists and others, is we have to wear the same protective clothing as people in the workplace. And we've got to wear long longs, etc. Some jobs, it makes perfect sense. Other jobs, once you put all this kit on, you're going, well, actually, why am I wearing this equipment? What is it protecting me against? So it's important to review, because if you put too much clothing on, or the wrong type, or wear stuff that's not necessary, you can build the heat stress. You're now building in a natural hazard deliberately. So review your PPE. Make sure it is practical for the job and can be used. Here, you can see a bandana. These can be bought from various stores. You can get them from the various safety ones, self-safety equipment, etc. Dip them in water, and then you can wear it around your neck as a cooling mechanism. Or you can unwrap it and wear it over the head. That's a high-vis vest that can go into a freezer and then come out and be worn. It's used in some places by people like drivers, etc. And it helps keep them cool while they're out and about, particularly around air-conditioned vehicles and things. They've got the high vis on, so they're covered that side for the safety, but they've also got something that's helping them stay cool. There is a lot out there. We've even got socks that can cool you down. So a lot out there on the marketplace. Do your research. For people that are, if you're in a company that has people moving around the country, then what I'll say to you is public toilet apps. There's none. Where are the public toilets in New Zealand? Are they open? Are they not open? Councils keep closing quite a few down, or they shut them at certain times. We as an industry, yourselves, and people like myself in the health and safety world, should we be campaigning on this matter and saying, look, we need something that should tell us what all the public toilets are. So when we're traveling, we know where we can stop off. It means we stay rehydrated, etc. Where can you refill your water? Also, for those that go around companies doing things, get agreements in place. For COVID at the moment, there's a reluctance to let people in, etc. But as long as people are fully vaccinated, they're complying with the government, the guidelines, etc., there's no reason why you arrive at a place, you shouldn't be able to use their toilet or something like that. If companies have been awkward, see if you can get agreements between the various ones. Can I use your toilet? Why not? Should be something nearby, or can I fill my water bottle up again? It's all our responsibilities to help each other out. Right, coming up towards the end. Good timing, Derek. Okay, these resources, you can go to WorkSafe New Zealand, the tool shed, put in about temperatures, and you will turn up working safely in extreme temperatures. That was created by WorkSafe in conjunction with professionals in New Zealand. They've got guidelines for the workers and guidelines for the businesses. They're actually good documents. They are kept up to date and got the latest information in. Things you should consider. It's free. Make use of it. Other one to think about is for those who are indoors all the time, then we're looking more at what we call the thermal environment, and to manage thermal comfort. This is more of a personal thing. Again, a good document from WorkSafe sitting in there. And I just grabbed this one off from the United Nations. It's up to date and it's looking at the agricultural industry and how to manage heat for the fruit pickers, etc., etc. So there's lots of others out there, and they are good documents because this is a global issue, not just in New Zealand. It's something we are facing into the future years. So have a look at these things, download them, read them, and do your searches on the net. So there's links to these. There's another one there, Guide to Managing Heat Stress, developed for use in the Australian environment. Handy thing to have. And at the bottom there, we've got the HASANZ register. If you need professional help in devising programs, etc., or going and doing monitoring, particularly the physical heat strain, etc., or an area surveys, then if you go to the HASANZ register, you will find professionals who can help you out, or go to professional organizations, the health and safety organizations. and they'll know somebody that can probably give you some guidance or help. But first place I'd always go to say to you is go to WorkSafe. Get those that are up to date. They are good documents. And that concludes my talk. Wes?
Yeah, thank you very much, Derek, for that webinar. I really appreciate you taking the time. I also would like to say thank you to all the participants. There's a couple of questions that came through so far. So if we've got a couple of minutes, so I'll just fire away. First question, Derek, is how well known do you think heat stress is a risk?
It's not well known. I'll be quite honest. We know a lot more about things like machine guarding, etc. But people tend not to think of heat stress as a risk because it suddenly comes on us, or something we have to get used to, particularly up here in the North Island. And I think many people actually overlook it. And if you think about yourself and your workforce, how often are you actually sitting there thinking, I'm actually thirsty, I need to get liquid on board? So it's definitely it's something we need more awareness of, and hopefully the people listening in on this can spread the word and get people starting to think about it.
Yeah, we'll post this webinar also up on our website and create some awareness around it so people can watch it, and so hopefully that will drive some of that. Second question is, what can a person, when I'm saying person, I'm talking about a health and safety practitioner, do to convince leaders to investigate and lean in on the actual severity and the frequency of heat stress?
Okay. On that, I would start off with something like that's very simple risk assessment, because that's an app you can download onto your phone. And one of the things I've found with a leadership and things is often we've got to produce evidence. It's not good enough just to go and say we have it. There is, they go, well, where's the problem? I've not seen anybody going sick or ill. But if we use something like the app, and we're seeing that we're heading into the middle to high risks each time, we say, well, look, here's the evidence. We're heading into these risk factors on a regular basis. We need something here, a policy, we need to get professionals involved, or we need our own equipment and some training so we can manage this ourselves. So I'd always start off with just doing a simple risk assessments, show the evidence, and normally once they start seeing evidence in front of their eyes that yes, we have a problem and it's going to affect us productivity wise, etc., normally they will come on board quite happily.
Well, thank you, Derek. Thank you. We've got about 3 more questions, so let's see if we've got time.
Yep.
Are there any long-term effects to being exposed to heat stress over weeks, months, or years?
Yes. If you've gone down with some of the more serious effects of heat stress, then you are more susceptible to heat stress and they'll get worse each time. So in some jobs I've worked in where we had to go into the deserts and things, if people had gone down with heat stress, they were banned from working in hot climates for that reason, or hot areas, because they were more susceptible, so they were higher risk. Other ones with the dehydration, etc., then there is a possibility of seeing more things like kidney stones and medical problems around those areas. And if you think of it, as we said, one of the things that happens is your heart's beating faster, it puts more strain in the body, you put more strain on the heart when you're trying to cool down. So again, you're using things up.
No, interesting. That's good to know. Next question is, how commonly do you find organizations have heat policies? And surely heat affects everyone in their job at some point or at some level.
I very rarely ever find it, being honest. There are some organizations that do have heat policies. The military are particularly good at it for obvious reasons. But once you move away, companies such as the foundries are very good at it. But when you move into bakeries, commercial kitchens, other ones that have heat producing things like molding machines, things like that, no, they tend not to have any.
Okay. Then last question that I've got currently. So guys, if there's maybe time for one more question. So if you've got a question, just pop it in the Q&A box. But the last question I've got here currently is there any impact on heat stressors with face coverings and masks? So more COVID related.
Well, there's been a number of studies. I haven't looked up the latest studies on it, but they don't seem to make actually a difference. The level is less than 1% of a difference, so it makes no difference to face masks. The worst thoughts, particularly with the heavy-duty rubber masks that we often wear, it put a greater burden on us, but it doesn't seem to. I say I'm not up to date with the latest on that area.
Okay. Well, that's basically it. All the questions. Nothing has come through now. So, guys, thank you yet again, Derek. Thank you very much for your time and effort in this. We'll put this on the website and share it as much as we can. Attendees, if you still have a couple of questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Derek. We're always here to help a hand, and because at the end of the day, we're trying to connect people to people and people to solutions, and we're here to help. So
and thanks for having me, Wes. And as Wes says, any questions, just fire them through. I'm always happy to answer.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you, everybody that's attending.
Thanks, Derek. It's fantastic.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Yeah, bye.